He doesn't have a laptop with her?
Maybe that's close. Plus, she's supposed to have handouts. Don't say that either.
Oh my God.
I want to shoot myself. Better pull up somebody. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. Okay, how are you here? No, fine. We have the census. Okay, I'm gonna be up in a couple of minutes. All right, so hopefully we can give you a laptop. All right, if not, we'll figure it out one way or another. See what we can do. Is if we try to do.
Okay, the time is, oops, I'm sorry. There we go, now I have it. Okay, the time now is 3:38, it looks like. And I'd like to call to order the second meeting of the Housing Task Force today. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. If I could ask you to please silence your phones and other electronic devices, and please join me in our pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Doreen, can we have roll call, please?
Absolutely. Benton,
Here.
Lujan, Ramos. Here. Sutherland. Here. Chadwick.
Here.
4 present.
4 present. Okay, very good. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second meeting of the newly formed Housing Task Force. We are pleased to have with us today members of our planning department, Alan Sorensen and Megan Tennerman. As I mentioned at our inaugural meeting last month, this is really a marathon, it's not a sprint. And a lot of people, I'm talking to a lot of people, and I know a lot of people, other people are talking to people as well. There's so much going on with housing, not just here in Orange County or New York State, but the entire country. So we're on a journey here to kind of see, well, what exactly is going on? What's happening? What are the numbers? What are the figures? And I had mentioned to my colleague Genesis earlier, it's kind of back to my teaching years here. We're kind of building a case here. We're building facts and figures that we're looking at that most people aren't aware of. I know, I speak for myself, that I didn't know that. Last month, we had community development here, and we looked at what Orange County is already doing, specifically Newburgh, some wonderful things. So we're on this journey, this task to kind of uncover and look under every rock that we possibly can by calling in experts like Alan and Megan here today to provide us with some numbers on Orange County. And I previewed them earlier today. And again, I found myself, oh, I didn't know that, or well, that's interesting. And although it may not seem like a lengthy presentation, it really begs us to ask questions. And that's why we have the experts here today. So I'd like to invite our planning department folks to come on up to the table. Thank you very much for being here. And Megan has expertly put together a slide presentation for us, housing by the numbers in Orange County. So without further ado, Megan, I'll let you take over and kind of walk us through what's going on or housing by the numbers here in Orange County.
Thank you. My name is Megan Tennerman. I am a planner for Orange County. I have been for coming up on 18 years. Wow. And for the last 15 of those, I have also been the county's demographic and census data analyst, which means that I have been looking at housing numbers for a very, very long time. And I really appreciate the legislature's attention to this very important issue.
Well, I will tell you, and Nicole Anderson is here, and talking to Nicole, I mean, just 5-10 minutes with Nicole, I'm like, I didn't know that. And it often came up very positive. You got to talk to Megan. Megan is our numbers person. I said, okay. So Nicole pointed me in the right direction. Thanks, Nicole.
And I can remember vividly working with Megan, like on the second, like 2 times ago, a census changes for the legislative districts. So when she first came on.
Yes, that was
I remember.
vivid. Yes. All right, I am trying to get the show to start here. Come on. Slideshow just over.
Yeah. Slideshow and then.
Yep. All right, there we go. Okay, so one thing that I've realized I should probably start off with is you've all filled out a census form. every 10 years, you get the form in the mail, you fill it out, you make sure they've got your name spelled correctly and all of that fun stuff, and it's only 10 questions. It did not used to only be 10 questions. Until 2000, 1 in 6 households would receive an extra long questionnaire that included more information about things like housing units, whether you had a complete kitchen, whether you had a car, and in 2000 they started asking if you had internet access. And then as of the 2000 census, they eliminated the long form questionnaire and went to the American Community Survey. So what you're going to see here is more current data that includes the same questions that have been on the long form, but it's collected annually and anonymized, and so what you're going to see are estimated numbers. Doesn't mean they're less accurate. I mean, they're a little less accurate just because the sample size is smaller, but they are the official numbers produced by the Census Bureau. So, as of the American Community Survey of 2023, Orange County is big enough to have a survey done every year, so we have very current data. This is our population, our estimated housing units. We are estimated to have 12,000 vacant units. That's not just, the house that you'd see on Scooby-Doo that's haunted by Old Man Smithers or whatever. This is a vacant unit because it's for sale or it is for rent. And those are the 2 largest categories of vacant units. The 3rd largest unit, which we'll get to, is vacant because it is used seasonally or recreationally, so your Airbnbs.
Would condemned buildings fall under that category?
Technically, if they are residential in nature, they could. It depends on the level of usage.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, does it also go by housing unit, meaning structure, or is it rental room unit? Like, can one house have 3 units if it's a 3-bedroom house?
No.
Okay.
That would be 1 residential unit. If it was a triplex and say floors were rented individually as apartments, that would be a 3-bedroom unit.
Okay.
Or a 3 unit building.
Megan, would you say that 12,000 is high or low historically?
I would say that is about in keeping with our historic levels. It is actually a little bit on the low side, and we're gonna get into that. So what we have here is our population versus housing unit gap. This is important because this is the number of people that you are cramming into a particular unit. So as you see in 1970, what we have there is a population, it doesn't show exact numbers there, but I can tell you it was 220,573. I deal with these numbers a lot. And so when you have more people that you're trying to house, and your housing unit growth has not kept up with your population growth, which you can see because of the flatter orange line there, then what you have is a lot of people who are either in overcrowded housing situations or who are not housed.
In the housing unit line reflects rentals as well as
That's
homeowner?
every housing unit that is in Orange County and habitable.
Yes, that's renter and owner occupied.
Yes, renter and owner occupied, yeah.
So the population is nearly double while the housing has remained fairly flat.
Yes,
Pretty flat,
Yeah.
not even twice as much, not even twice.
yeah, it's, that's a little misleading there. The housing units have tripled, and the population has doubled. That is not sufficient, however, to keep up because the population started off so much higher.
Mm.
The average household size in Orange County is 2.86 people per household, which is higher than the average for the state of New York and the United States. And what we're seeing in this slide here is that the US as a whole, which is the graph on the left there, is seeing a decline in average household size. That's due to a lot of factors. People living alone and how people are counted in housing units. For instance, a dorm room is an individual housing unit. And so is an assisted living apartment. So that's a little bit of a change there, and that accounts for some of the drop, but also people are wanting to have smaller households, and they're not having as many children, of course, because the beginning of that graph is the beginning of the baby boom.
But even if they have smaller families, they still require housing,
Of course,
Yes.
which is so fewer people means
So-
we need more.
we need more units, yes. What this graph is here on, is here on the right, this is Orange County. I couldn't get numbers back to 1940, sorry. But the 1980 numbers, and then we show this large spike here in 1990, and that is due primarily to the housing boom in 1987. Because the cost of housing went up so drastically in that particular year. Housing in Orange County, actually in my particular neighborhood in New Windsor at that time, one house sold 3 times over that year. And by the end, it was 4 times the price
Wow.
as when it had
Yeah,
begun.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I did real estate appraisals at that time for my
Yeah.
grandfather. And you literally had people come in at 9 o'clock and making an offer, the people at 11 o'clock upped it, the people at 3 o'clock upped it,
Mhm.
and it just kept going.
And it just kept going like that, which is why, if you can't afford to keep upping your offer and upping your offer,
Yeah,
you are stuck living with mom and dad for a little bit longer, or with your roommates for a little bit longer, and that's why we see that spike in household size at that point. Because you can't afford to move out of your, 1-bedroom apartments when you have the second baby.
I started to help my grandfather because he was overloaded with
Yes.
the bank
Yeah, it was so
appraisal
busy, yeah.
process that he was covering. So that's when I
Yeah.
started my appraisal career.
I mean, I was 9 years old and I knew it was a crazy time.
Hmm.
So let's talk about vacancy rates. You have a homeowner vacancy rate in Orange County of 0.9% and a renter vacancy rate of 4.4%. Rob, why is that a bad idea?
What, the vacancy rate?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Because if you have a 0% or a very small vacancy rate, particularly under 5%, then you can't, yes, they can charge more money because of the scarcity of units, and so then your borrowing power and your purchasing power is decreased. But as well, you can't move. So you are in your 1-bedroom unit when the second baby comes and maybe the third baby, or you're in your McMansion even though you've fallen down the stairs 4 times. You can't move to a different spot that is better suited for your
There's no
family
place to go.
because there's no place to go.
Wow.
And others can't move up. They can't
others
sell
can't.
and move up,
Exactly,
upgrade, so to speak.
exactly.
Hmm.
So, as you see, we've got a vacancy rate between 5 and 8% indicates generally a pretty healthy area. If you have a vacancy rate higher than that, obviously that indicates that your supply is greater than your demand and prices go down. But unless you have at least that 5%, then there's no mobility. So because our rate is 0.9% for homeowners and 4.4% for renters, we need to look at the constraints to our existing supply. Yes,
no upward mobility, but does it cause reverse mobility back in,
Not reverse mobility precisely, it's more reverse stagnation.
that's what I said.
You remember that median family, or that median household income we looked at in $94,000? So that person in a one-bedroom apartment is probably paying less than the $23.59 that they could afford to pay. But, I mean, not necessarily. The landlord raises the rent on you, then that's what you're paying. But if you are in that unit, then the person who's making $70,000 who could afford the $1,500 in rent can't move into that unit because you're stuck there because you can't find the $2,000 unit.
And this is why, just to let my colleagues know, this is why vacancy rates are so important when it comes to passing certain tenant protection legislation, state level wise. Because that, to your point, lets us know, right, that if we're falling below a certain percentage, that the rental market is squeezed. And so
Yes.
in the city of Newburgh, that's why the city council there has been able to pass certain tenant protections because of the vacancy rate there.
I think Middletown did too, didn't they, just recently?
They had a hearing for it,
Hearing for the,
but I
For
don't
the
think
good
anything
cause.
has happened yet.
yeah, good cause eviction, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So we did talk a little bit about vacation rentals. There are about 2,300 vacant units. I just did a quick search on Airbnb and there were 648 listings in Orange County. That's not out of the question, but it is about 15%, 18% of our total vacant units, which means that those are off the market for people who, you know, need to live somewhere.
But if the owner might move back to that unit if they can't rent it.
Potentially, but most of these
Most of these
are
are
second
income
homes
properties?
and income properties.
And
Okay.
people from out of state
Yes,
that buy properties here.
yes.
Yeah. It's a big issue in the city of Newburgh.
So, the rule of thumb for housing affordability is that you should not spend more than 30% of your gross income on housing costs, and that's your rent or your mortgage payment, your insurance, your utilities, and whatever housing fees you might have incurred, or like, maybe the city charges extra for garbage pickup or something. So 30% of median household income, if you use the 94,000 figure, you can afford for all of those things to cost you $2,359 per month. I did some work on mortgage calculator and stuff like that as well, and so that would a house. If you're putting 20% down and you have your good credit score and you can get a good rate on your mortgage, you can afford a house costing a maximum of $390,000.
You know, which used to be a pretty high figure when you think about
It
it.
did.
And, you know, I told this story just recently. In 1985, I began my teaching career.
Mhm.
And I made $16,000 and change a year. I was able to afford a two-family home and a brand new car on that salary. And I rented the apartment for $400 a month. That's the sad part, that I think a young teacher, a young professional today, based on these numbers, Megan, what you're at, they can't do it. And my other hat currently is a realtor. We know if it's under $400,000, there's going to be a bidding war on it.
Mhm.
Because that's, and here it is, the proof is there, is that, you know, we're gonna list a home, I hate even to say, but for $299.
Mhm.
And I know that people are gonna come out of the woodwork and they're gonna bid this thing way up. because the price point. So that's really an amazing number. And how many, yeah, so 50% of the population, that doesn't include the other 50% that are totally boxed out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that 50% that are totally boxed out, that's 69,428 households, as you see.
And you know, Megan, I'm really impressed by your numbers because just, you know, off the top, I'm not a numbers guy, but I know like the rent there, that number is right on the money. It's 2,400.
Mhm.
And a landlord knows they can get 2,400 for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. And that's it. After that, they're not going to get it, or the chances are, you know, less. But if it's, you know, and I tell people, well, do you think I can get, and of course, everyone gets greedy. No, you can't. I said, your number's around 2,400.
Mhm.
And there it is. That's great.
But that also shows my preference. My preference is home ownership, part of,
Right.
you know, the American
Right,
dream of the
right.
picket fence. You should be able to, in Orange County, build a very nice 1 or 2 bedroom condo or
Right,
townhouse
right.
for much less than 390,000, so
Right.
that people would be spending their money not to the landlord, but building their own personal equity.
Yeah, and we've all spoken about.
That just
That's-
shows how we
that's it. I
should be
mean,
building,
right.
what we should be building.
Right, not apartments, because
Not
they're not gonna
apartments.
build equity. And the key to wealth building in this country, of course, is equity. So, no, I agree with you 100%. You and I spoke about that. Janice and I spoke about it. Yeah, I mean, for 390, could they have a nice townhouse or a condo?
They should have, be
You know.
able to have a great,
But that goes back to Nicole now. We'd have to talk about infrastructure, right, Nicole? The water and sewer.
Infrastructure
Yeah.
is huge.
well,
So that's another,
but the apartment and
Right,
condo
right.
infrastructure is probably the same.
right,
Also, the zoning,
Yeah.
you need the land use regulations to enable you to build the various types of housing that you're talking about.
Right, but most apartments are built in R2 or R3 with some sort of maybe sometimes preferences for condensing so you have more open space. It
Yeah.
should be, that condo and apartment zoning should be exactly the same.
It
And
absolutely,
that-
no, please.
I was just gonna say, but then that goes back to my statement, the last meeting, that 58% of Americans are one paycheck away from being homeless.
I was just
Mm.
gonna
Yeah.
say that.
So-
Yeah.
And
And most people don't
hear-
make
We're dealing with a
94,000.
specific income.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
that most people
it's
don't
not-
make. Most people don't make $94,000, so.
yeah,
I don't make that money.
Yeah,
yeah, no, I'm,
My household
After
does.
today, you should.
But the
Well, by
time is
house-
coming.
By all means, you go to personnel and we will talk about that. But my household does make that, because my husband is working, but. But yes, if you are a one-person household in Orange County, you are very unlikely to be making that kind of money.
yeah.
And you're making
To be able to be a
$58,000
homeowner.
less.
Yes.
$57,000 less.
So, I use the little money house graphic a lot because it's adorable and I like it. But what it is representing in this particular case is not at all adorable. Let's talk about cost burdened households. That money that you are spending that is over that $23.59
Yeah.
a month
Mhm.
is money that you do not have in other aspects of your life. So approximately a third of owner occupied housing units are paying more than 30% of their income, 30% or more of their income towards housing costs. And when you look at renter households, it's 57.5% of renter households are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. It is a horrifying number when you look at the over 50% of income. And I have not included that here just because it makes me sick.
Yeah.
And that's why, Lee, to your point about home ownership, that's why that pipeline becomes so difficult for people when they're living paycheck to paycheck, because as we all know, you need a down payment, you need all these
Yeah.
for closing costs, and when you're barely able to pay your rent, you're not
Well,
gonna be
even
able to save
trying
up.
to rent, you need
Yeah.
how many months
yeah.
of, you know,
For
to.
that.
And your credit needs to be
Exactly.
good and all the.
Yeah, yeah, it's very
Yeah,
difficult.
actually, if you go back to that,
Security.
that house cost
Security deposit.
there, that 20% deposit is $78,000.
That's for
just the 20% down on your mortgage.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
390.
Yeah, and again,
For the
Which is-
390 house.
Yeah.
And that's, assuming you have good credit,
Mhm.
your interest rate is gonna be 6.28% on that. Because the day that I looked, that was the average for Orange County. If you are in the absolute maximum best position, you're still going to have that much going out a month.
And could you go back over that again?
Sure.
You mentioned the 20% down payment?
Right, that's gonna be $78,000 on a house costing 39
Oh.
or 390.
yeah, that's right.
I remember when we had lived in Warwick and had needed a bigger home and wanted to stay in Warwick and we couldn't afford it.
Mhm.
Going to, looking at homes that, you know, were within the price range, but needed $150,000 worth of work. And not being able to do that, or then seeing like some neighbors' homes, like these huge homes that they paid a ridiculous amount of money for, no furniture,
Mhm.
like no furniture,
Mhm.
you know, and it just, it seems just obviously.
Because when you're spending that 30% of your income, more than that 30% of your income, you don't have the money for an emergency expense.
And you're eating ramen noodles and rice with butter.
I mean, you get used to ramen over time, but, but yes, if you cannot, if you're one paycheck away from homelessness, which so many of us are, then you can't cover your $400 emergency expense. So when your brakes go out, what do? You can't get to work. You get fired, you can't afford your rent,
Yeah.
You're,
and you're out.
You know,
That's it.
a while back, I had gone up to emergency housing, to honor,
Mhm.
and I met some people exactly that. And, you know, people have the wrong perception, say, oh, listen, these people are working, sometimes 2, 3 jobs. Their car breaks down. I just had an oil change and inspection today for my car, and it was $150.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, but somebody needs brakes, what's it gonna cost them?
well, that's the warming
Yeah,
stations.
Yeah,
There are several
Yeah.
people, we had several guests all winter that have full-time jobs.
Yep.
But
I
no
used to-
place to
Yeah.
put their head.
I used to volunteer with a program that supports homeless families with young children. And the program, the first family that I worked with, he was working full-time nights, she was working full-time days. One of them was with their infant daughter at all times. And their 2 above minimum wage incomes couldn't support them after a health crisis put them out of their apartment. So they're on the streets with a 7-month-old.
yeah. Geez.
We were able to help them and they are now in stable housing, and that's great, but without that relief, and they were only in the program for about 6 weeks. Okay, so,
Fearless and all those groups, they do a great job.
Phenomenal.
They do.
That we'd be in trouble without
Oh, yeah.
our local groups
Yeah.
like that.
yes, we would be in much bigger trouble than we are, yeah. So, let's talk about people who are homeless. There is a point in time count that's conducted by volunteers that goes to the Department of Housing and Urban Development every year. In New York State, the point in time count, which is the 3rd Saturday in January, in 2024, that number was 158,019 people. Now, a lot of that obviously is in New York City. But the problem in New York is high. As you see, we have about 20% of the nation's total homeless population. And we have the 3rd highest rate of homelessness behind Hawaii and DC.
Do you think the numbers would change if we did a count also in the summer? When people are not, let's say, in
Shelter.
whatever, the shelter, the hiding place that they've been in, they've been able to find.
Possibly. The issue with the count is that it takes place in January because
Right.
it is, of course, very difficult to count homeless people because they don't have a fixed location.
Right.
So the count takes place in January because most people are at indoor shelters or warming stations or
hiding in an abandoned building.
they're in an abandoned building, and that's why this is done by local volunteers. A lot of those people have the boots on the ground knowledge where the squatters are, where the camps are, and have that level of trust that I'm not taking down your name, I'm not taking down any of your information, I just need to know how many people are here. Okay, I got 17, we're good.
No, I would just think maybe we should do one in the winter, one in the summer.
That could be discussed with HUD. They do the January count, because it's also hard to get volunteers out.
Well, but maybe they're just satisfied with the number. Let's go beyond and see if there's a difference.
The key number is your last point, is the number of families.
It is,
And
because
that's where, when you go up to honor, and that's what I discovered was quite an eye opener for me. It's like, where are these people? With families. So those are the folks that were in a home or in an apartment and the car broke down or there were medical bills and now they're homeless. So when you look at 60% of all homeless people in New York are families or they're
Yeah.
living in these hotels, which drives me crazy.
Mhm.
And the county is paying a fortune to house them in really substandard.
Yeah, not the
Yeah.
conditions at all.
Yeah,
no,
no.
especially with
It's
children.
really-
I don't know if you've ever been to some of them.
It's
Oh, yeah.
It's
yeah.
horrifying.
Right.
It's yeah, yeah, when I was social service chair with Darcy, I like, this is just, and what we're paying, but that's discussion for another day. But that's really alarming, and it makes sense with the price of everything today, and the cost of renting, buying, or whatever.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So if you take a look at this is our particular share. Of that 158,000 total, almost 800 of them are in Orange County.
I'm sorry, say that again, the writing says.
Yeah, I know.
About
This is gonna be posted, I should
779.
point out.
Oh, okay. We'll
It
get a
is
copy.
700.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
have this sent to you, Doreen will.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, this will be posted online and I'm sure Doreen will be sending this out. But yeah, there are 779 individuals in Orange County, and that does include everyone within a family.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot, but I still feel it's low.
Probably, I think
It's
one
just
person.
Well, again, it is
my-
very hard to count the homeless
Yes,
population.
Yeah.
it's just my
Yeah.
opinion. I think that's low.
I think you're
It
right.
might be an undercount.
Yeah,
I think it's a severe undercount, actually, but it's,
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm far off base.
oh, you
Yeah.
think the number
Well,
really is
so-
higher?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
much
okay.
higher.
So to your point on that, when you think about during the school year, children are covered under the McKinney-Vento Act. So they are considered homeless, even though they may be in a relative's home or they may be in a friend's house or something. So I think what you're talking about the families, not the people on the streets. The overall number of homeless.
these are the street homeless, but these are also the people that are in
In hotel
local shelters,
yes.
yes.
But and to your point, it is much higher.
It probably is absolutely higher. This does not take into account other sources of information like the school district homeless coordinators. And any child covered under McKinney-Vento.
McKinney-Vento?
McKinney-Vento, it's
Never heard of it. Thank you.
MCKINNEY hyphen VENTO.
Thank you.
So there have been previous studies, or at least one previous housing study for Orange County. In early 2007, Orange, Dutchess, and Ulster counties instituted the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Mark that date. That unfortunately required the use of 2006 data. because of the date that it was initiated, and of course, the housing market crashed in December of 2007. Before the report was even published, it was wrong. Wrong on so very many levels. But what it did show was that our affordability gap as of 2006 was that 31,272 units total, and was estimated to be over 44,000 units by the calendar year 2020. This third bullet point here, where the consultant recommended building a portion of those units, the consultant recommended that those units should be built, those 11,000, but not by Orange County. I may not have been completely clear about that. Those 11,000 units needed to be constructed to bring the affordability gap down. This next point here, I think, is something that we need to consider. Building affordable units is supply side. The demand side also needs to be addressed as part of a broader strategic effort. And the demand side of affordable housing is, of course, bringing in better paying jobs, getting people up to a higher standard of living so that they can be making more money, so that they can be affording market rate housing as opposed to needing to be in affordable housing, subsidized housing. So those 11,000 units that the consultant recommended be built were 11,000 obviously affordable units. In between 2006 and 2015, we permitted a total of 9,929 units. Virtually all of those were market rate. Market rate or luxury. Very, very few of those were affordable to people making 80% to 120% of the county median income at any of those years.
That's because they're income units. They're built for a developer as
Yes.
an income
Yes,
unit.
right.
There were a
So-
series of low to moderate income housing and senior housing developments. You can see them right there
Yes,
in
but
Goshen.
small
Yeah,
proportion wise to the
Yes.
main other.
Right, and actually, there weren't a lot of them in that specific time frame. It was a weird little quirk there. Most of those were built either
After 20.
before or after that time frame. But yeah, most of the affordable units that have been built in Orange County are age restricted to people who are 55 or older, or they are intended for people with disabilities who are living on SSDI. And you have Alan to thank for the brevity of this presentation. I tend to be quite wordy. And
Team
so,
effort.
yes, I am lucky to have a good editor. But does anyone have any questions?
No, it's perfect, really. I
Yeah,
can't
no.
thank you enough. This has been extremely informative. That's what I was really hoping for, is just to kind of to lay it out there to see what's happening. Which, naturally begs more questions. Okay, well, what about this or what about that? Is there any way, see, one of my fears is, and I see this happening in real estate, someone is in New York City and they're paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month rent, and then they come up here.
Mhm.
And we're talking about the local housing market, folks in Newburgh or Middletown, even where I am in Pine Bush, and I can't afford that house. If you build there's no, are you gonna, like a vacuum, pull people out of higher areas that scoop up the housing now? I mean, that's what's happening.
Urban area.
This is actually I'm sorry, Genesis.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, the unfortunate reality is that there's no way for any development to be for a specific group of people,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
a developer can't say like only town of Newburgh or
Right.
only Pine
Orange
Bush
County,
residents
yeah.
can, because
Yeah.
that's considered discrimination.
Yes, discriminatory.
So-
Actually,
Yeah.
there are ways that you can write affordable housing and inclusionary housing zoning provisions that do give preference to your current residents or
Mm.
people who work for your municipalities. I believe you included that in your Walden,
Yeah, some of the communities have preferences for like volunteer firemen,
Yeah,
civil
yeah,
service
yeah.
employees, things of that nature. But to your point, Rob, the housing market's supply and demand.
Yeah.
So if a bunch of people from the city or northern New Jersey said, oh, it's much cheaper to go up to
Yeah.
Orange County, I'll
Yeah.
sell my home for $1 million and I'll buy one up there for $390. That's gonna put pressure on the housing market. One thing, many years ago, when I was a consultant planner with the Village of Walden, they had asked me to draft an inclusionary zoning provision, which we subsequently adopted. And what that did is it required for multifamily housing developments, it required a mandatory set aside, 10%
Yeah.
of the units had to be set aside.
Yep.
Yeah, for affordable units. And at that time, I did analyses of the village and in effect, came to the realization that there was an inadequate supply at that time of low to moderate income housing. So serving people between 30 and 80% of the median household income. But where the gap was, was the missing middle. So people making between 80 and 100% of the median family income. So that inclusionary zoning provision in the Village of Walden has a set aside, 10% set aside for persons making 80 to 120% of the median family income. It's my understanding that the area in which we set up that zoning for that purpose, that finally, that was probably adopted in 2008, that development is actually proceeding and it was result in 40 affordable housing units out of the 240 that are being developed. So I think the one advantage of pursuing like an inclusionary zoning provision is every time you're building new units, you're also adding to the supply of affordable units.
Right.
And this is just my personal view that that's a good approach in that for a number of reasons. One, it does provide an opportunity to continuously create affordable units. You're also creating them in typically in areas that are well served with water and sewer, public transit, all of those things, so that people have access to jobs. Some of the distinguishing features in that particular law are the units cannot be from the exterior, they cannot be distinguished from market rate units. And in that particular development, I believe there's like 10 different multifamily buildings. So the units can't be all located in one building. So they're spread out through. So I think that it did include some interior finishing, little flexibility for the developer. But even that, there are subtle differences just to kind of try to keep the cost down, but they're equivalent units. So that's just, one example of like inclusionary zoning. But again, you need to do that. You really do need water and sewer infrastructure, access to transportation, and that's within our existing centers. So.
And another thing with mixed income development, with inclusionary zoning, as well, is that there's been research that shows, right, that when you have folks from different income levels interacting and living in the same communities, it's really beneficial. But then also, I think when local municipalities implement something like inclusionary zoning, in my opinion, I think it also removes this level of kind of sometimes there's ways in which things become political sometimes with development, or all the time actually, for many reasons. But I think if developers kind of know you know, they know that that's the expectation, right? It becomes non-negotiable. It's not an option for the developer. They know that if they want to develop in this particular area, that there is that mandate to have X amount of affordable units as well. And so I think it just removes that whole layer of, you know, sometimes debates that happen within communities about like, is this gonna be market rate? Is it gonna be mixed income? Is it gonna be affordable housing? So I think that's another advantage as well of having
Yeah.
inclusionary zoning policies.
So you made, when you spoke there, it made it sound like when you were this consultant, it was years ago.
Yes, it was.
Okay, what time frame?
Around, I think it was 2008. It's up on the
2008,
Walden
okay.
Walk Hill Trail.
And then you just made it sound like they were just starting to build these units.
Yeah,
So look at the gap in time.
yeah. I mean, part of that,
13 years.
I know, part of it goes, you know, is going back to Megan's presentation, 2008 housing market collapse. So
That's true.
Well,
that was a big
yeah,
thing.
that was,
Is that on Colburn
Yeah,
Island Road?
But still, that's,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
That is a.
well, it is, but back to Genesis's point, there are these huge debates. Lee, I don't know if you remember, there was a development in 2010, senior housing development on Meadow Hill Road. And I will never forget this because I was the planner for the town of Newburgh at the time. And I attended the public meeting at John Usutin's request to help them sell this. The development had been approved as a senior age-restricted affordable development. It was something like 30 units. And the owner wanted to the developer wanted to remove the age restriction and just have it be affordable. The public hearing was 5 hours long. People were objecting, they were bringing up some concerns about traffic on Meadow Hill Road, which are actually legitimate. For anyone who's driven on Meadow Hill Road, yeah,
With the bridge and everything.
with the bridge and everything, and it would have been like right after the bridge.
Mhm.
And some concerns that were just about the element that lives in affordable housing. And so one of my points that sometimes gets people to stop and think, when I'm telling people about affordable housing is, who do you think lives in affordable housing? And of course, they have this picture in their minds, and what they are not expecting is me, your public employees, your teachers, your volunteer firefighters. That
Your
argument
sons, your
did not
daughters.
actually hold water that night. They told me I could live somewhere else, but,
Yeah,
But
right.
there- but there's a lot of not
Your
in my
children
backyard.
just
Exactly.
graduated college,
Exactly.
Exactly.
starting off,
your kid who is in their entry level
yeah.
job, your parent who is on a
Fixed income.
fixed income.
Yeah, it's the person who's you know, your barista when you go to Starbucks, you know, who's they speak to every day, and it's like, you know,
So inclusionary zoning,
inclusionary.
Yes,
that is done then by municipality.
yes.
Yeah, it is, yeah. We encourage it, you know, when we do our GML reviews, we if we see a multifamily housing development coming in, we encourage, we can only have an advisory opinion, so we encourage them to pursue that. You know, I think the Walding example is a good approach. Some communities will take a density bonus approach, so they'll say to the
Right, that's
developer, you know, we'll give you a 10% density bonus, you can do that, but then again, it comes back to access to water and sewer infrastructure. You know, it's, and there's, you know, some just demographic trends that are kind of like, we're swimming upstream a little bit, so as the average household size comes down, just that factor alone is going to increase the number of the dwelling units that are needed to house the population. So as an example, I grew up in a 9-person household, mom and dad and my 6 brothers. So it was a tiny house too. So but there's some communities in the United States where the average person per household is like approaching, there's maybe even a few that where it's currently less than 2 persons per household. Because you have, you know, the widower who's living alone. You may have someone that's just starting out, that's single, so they're living alone. All of those factors are gonna like increase the demand for
Yeah.
housing units. Also, I think we need to think about smaller housing units. So, I mean, it was a little crowded growing up, but you know, it was 1,200 square foot house. But now we're building these homes that are like, you know, 3,500 square feet, 4,000 square feet. You know, it's another factor to kind of like think about that. We're not gonna be able to build a 4,000 square foot for everyone that wants one, you know, but it's just another factor. Megan and I will often talk about accessory dwelling units as being another option that's out there. It is a mechanism to may allow a senior, maybe a senior wants to actually downsize, live in an accessory dwelling unit, keep their home rented out. That's an option, or maybe they have, you know, children are just getting started and would be nice to give them a leg up, and you know, maybe it's just extra income for a senior couple to be able to live and stay in place. So there's a couple different, you know, options out there, but we thought it was important to, you know, just go over what the census and demographic data is showing us, and I think that in many respects speaks for
No,
itself.
it really does. It's
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Given the information that we have now, and, you know, I personally am very familiar with a lot of issues in the district I represent. But what information, do you think, is missing or that would be useful and beneficial for the legislature in particular? Or just like county government in general, right, that could help either move different decisions around future policies, future funding opportunities, or just ways in which we can be more responsive to the housing crisis here in Orange County. And obviously, the role of county government is limited because a lot of things fall on the municipal level. But curious to know what gaps there are in information, statistics, data that would be helpful at this time.
I think, you know, some of the data that we just provided is helpful. Through our GML reviews, you know, we're encouraging communities to, you know, look at inclusionary zoning provisions. There's some good examples out there. There are a variety of different forums out there dealing with, you know, housing affordability, whether it's some are provided by New York Planning Federation, other, you know, housing coalitions. With respect, you know, there are limits to what the county can do. I think a lot of the work, not the McCall under the bus, but there's a lot of good work that's already being done by the Community Development Office. So they really have their pulse on funding availability to assist in the development of affordable units. And I think Nicole's team does a terrific job of like getting that information out to the communities. You know, I think, you know, those are things that we're doing. And, you know, just the fact that you have created this housing task force and are having these meetings, I think is a big plus too.
Just to add on to that, I would say that this is a huge step for the county, and we really do appreciate you examining the issue. I would say that one of the things that the county would want to look at is infrastructure availability. Transportation as a system throughout the county, and to have water and sewer infrastructure that is more available and more accessible, and also fiber optics to accommodate more schooling and more job availability for people who are telecommuting. I will point out that we cannot build our way out of this. We didn't create, this housing crisis didn't
Agreed.
pop up overnight. It's not gonna be solved overnight by just getting in developers and bulldozers and putting up 300,000 units. Well, in the first place, we don't have space for that. What I'm currently working on, in between GML 239 reviews and, census analysis is a housing needs assessment update, which I am hoping to, not only have the county level, but I'm hoping to look at, things that individual municipalities can do. What I would encourage all of the legislators to do is also go back to your municipalities and talk up inclusionary zoning. Because Walden's the only one that has it.
Wow.
44 municipalities and we got one zoning ordinance.
And,
Interesting.
not to be, GML.
Oh,
General
Gen-
municipal law,
Okay,
sorry.
okay, okay.
Yeah, it's that particular section, 239 LMNN of general municipal law that sends the referrals our way. Just speaking on the transportation, we are expanding the service in both Middletown and Newburgh. So we did a Middletown area transit system redesign as well as a Newburgh area transit system redesign. These things take time to get in place, so the study's completed. The consultants are going through now and defining the routes and bus stop locations. A lot of people don't realize this, but like, it's not just a matter of running down to the public transit bus dealership and picking out buses. We actually have to order the buses, specify each bus individually, place an order, and it's like a year and a half before the buses are completed. So, and it's to get to that point of placing the orders and inordinate amount of bureaucracy and paperwork. But in both Middletown and Newburgh, as well as throughout the county, we're looking at expanding the hours of service, days of service, and expand the routes. Now, the county's unique. It's not that it's unique, but it's a rural county. So it's much easier to provide public transit in highly densely populated areas, not as much so in between areas. And I often use this example that when I was doing my internship in Yonkers, I was living in Coney Island at the time, but there was not a one-seat ride that I could take from Coney Island even to Manhattan. I had to switch, several trains on the subway system to get there. So I've heard someone say that I can't get a one-seat ride from this point to this point in Orange County. That's probably unrealistic. Just giving, you'd be running one person every 3 days. You'd have to run a bus route back and forth on a route, and then you might pick up a person every 3 days and you try to do that everywhere. So what we're looking at is like kind of a gap there is starting to look at opportunities for micro transit. So there may be specific routes between major employers in the city, for example, where micro transit, it's almost like a public Uber, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think could help us fill that gap because you can't run a fixed route between every destination in the county. It's just
Yeah.
And certain big employers in Newburgh already do that on their own.
some of them do, yes, yeah.
And the Employment and Career Center also helps with transportation as well.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Service that they have.
Mhm.
It's for a limited time, but they tend to not knock people off the program if they know that there's not going to be a way for them to get to work.
And then there's Dial Bus around the county too.
Oh, yes, yeah, and that's provided through our department as well.
But that, again,
But
that's,
that's,
that's certain
Yeah.
time windows.
yeah,
Right.
and
Yes, yeah,
And I think especially with just the economic development folks in the county, I think the more opportunities with transportation to connect people to these upcoming opportunities are going to be key. To Megan's point around, we're not just going to be able to build our way out of this issue, like we really have to look at the socioeconomic side of things as well. If not, we're going to always end up with folks that are unhoused or
Yes.
just rent burdened, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Been absolutely excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank
Great
you so much.
presentation.
Really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
If anyone has any questions, my email is standard format, and I'm happy to run custom.
The report you're
Thank you.
currently working on, any idea when you may finish it up? The other, did you-
The needs of the
municipal?
housing.
Honestly, I really
No,
do not know.
don't do it,
I'm
yeah.
trying very
Yeah.
hard for the end of summer, but
Okay, yeah. Just
we're,
maybe down the road, we might be having you
You
come
look forward
back.
to
and-
hearing
Yeah,
Yes,
Yes.
truly.
Yeah, it's-
Well, you're affected because when people know something needs to get done, oh, let's ask Megan.
well, that and also our 239 referral load is quite high at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
great. All right, I'll call
Thank
for a
you.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, in a second. Thank you very much
Thank you.
and have a good afternoon, everyone.